It's time to journey through sci-fi.
Hi there and welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi. This is the third episode of our series on AI. My name is Matt.
And my name is James.
And what films are we looking at today, James?
We are looking at Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Amazing. What a pair to watch and talk about.
Yeah.
And our theme this week is man versus machine.
Yeah, it should be very exciting to talk about these two films. I know you're a big James Cameron fan, Matt.
I'm a massive James Cameron fan, and rewatching these was so satisfying and just... there's always a fear that it's going to be like, do I like these films as much as I think?
Yeah.
I still like both these films as much as I thought.
I had exactly the same thing because it's been so long since I've seen them. I was wondering if they would sort of hold up.
Yeah.
Just because it's been such a big gap since the first time I watched them.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely... I've got such like memories of watching them growing up, and they have aged.
Yeah, they've definitely aged.
But
I mean, Terminator
they're
2
aging
holds
really
up a
well.
bit more...
Yeah.
In terms of sort of like the special effects and stuff.
Yeah,
but I mean,
definitely.
they're both still really good and really fun watches.
I think Terminator 2 is the better example of James Cameron at his blockbuster sci-fi best, which is, these amazing action set pieces, incredible special effects, and great like emotional performances between the characters, which is something that he really balances with those big blockbuster special effects so well. The first one's much more, I don't know, like a grittier kind of weird little film that kind of
Yeah.
works on its own.
Because the first one, was that his first film that he made?
It's like his second or third,
Yeah.
but everything before that was like, because he did Piranha 2, I think.
Piranha 2?
Yeah, that was like his first film as director.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's as well remembered in the James Cameron
Yeah, because
canon.
I kind of had it in my head that this was his first film that he'd done.
Definitely like a breakout, who's this guy, big time director.
Yeah.
And was he married to Gail Ann Hurd at the time, the producer?
I think so. Because I know he, off the back of Terminator 2, he started dating the actress who plays Sarah Connor, didn't he?
Well, yeah, they married quite a few years later. They were married in
Yeah.
like late 90s, I think.
I think they sort of had
Right.
a thing going on in between all of that other stuff that was going on set.
Anyway, we're not here to
No, we're not
speculate
here
on
to
his
speculate.
relationships. So I think they have aged well. I definitely remember watching Terminator 2 when I was younger and just thinking it was like the most modern, coolest film ever. And now it really looks like such a stereotypical 90s blockbuster. It really
Yeah.
set the tone for 90s
It's got all of those
blockbusters.
90s elements,
Yeah.
which you come to know.
But it's still just perfectly made. The way it just moves from like the big set pieces, they're all seamlessly linked together. I love it. And the first one does look incredibly 80s now. The haircuts. Arnie's got this weird, like, it's not a mullet, but it's kind of like, it's just a few inches away from a mullet.
His hair does change quite a bit over
Yeah.
the film, as I'm sure we're going to discuss later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, Arnie's hair is definitely a good topic for discussion, I would say.
So when did you first see these films? What are your memories of these films?
So one of my first memories is before I actually saw the film. So when I was younger, my parents got me the toys.
Nice.
So I had lots of like the action figures and stuff. So I always had this idea of what Terminator was before I even saw it. And I just had to guess on sort of like plots and stuff. But I had a few different figures. One of them was the traditional one from Terminator 2 when Arnie sort of got all the cybernetics showing through his flesh.
Right at the end.
Yeah. And
I was
when he's got
watching
the
it.
half face.
So when I
yeah.
watched it, I'm in my 30s. When I was watching it, I was like, damn, he looks cool there. I kind
Yeah.
of wish I had an action figure of him looking like that.
That's it. So I had that one, and I had one of the T-1000.
Oh, nice.
But the T-1000 one that I had was, so he's dressed like he is when he's on the motorbike, like a highway
Sure.
patrolman.
Yeah.
And it has this weird thing where it basically had like a rocket launcher.
What?
But the
Can't
rocket
form
launcher...
complex machines.
But the rocket launcher was really weird because it came from the back of his shorts. So basically, it was his arse. So you'd press a button and his arse would go up and over the top, and then suddenly it would be a rocket launcher. You could fire missiles from it. I'll have to show you a picture
Yeah,
later.
I need to see that.
Yeah, because
Have you still got it?
I think I've still got it somewhere.
Amazing.
So I had that one, and the other really exciting like figure thing that I had was this sort of play set where you could make the flesh for Arnie. So you had like a little cybernetic plastic skeleton,
Yeah.
and you put it through this machine, and then it made some sort of like fake skin for the
cool.
figure, and you could like tear bits of the skin off to make it look like Arnie throughout the film.
Wow, that's a really niche toy.
Yeah.
That's cool though.
So like I had all of this expectation going
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the film. I think Terminator 2 was the first one I saw because my mates had recorded it off of the TV.
Hmm.
And so there was this big expectation. They were like, oh, it's so violent. It's got this bit with this like milk carton. And they were talking, telling me all these vivid sort of violent scenes. And then going into that sort of as a teenage boy and seeing all those bits and those special effects was quite an epic thing to watch at the time.
So I was trying to remember when I first saw it on the way up here, because I've got a really distinct memory of there was like 2 or 3 films that my mum didn't want us to watch when I was a kid. So The Exorcist was one of them.
Yeah,
And that meant
classic.
I didn't watch The Exorcist until like my mid-teens when my parents were out.
Yeah.
And we had the DVD and I put it on and I was really disappointed because I was expecting so terrifying and like
Yeah.
so violent. And, you know, it's a scary film, but it didn't live up to the hype of it being like a banned movie in my house. And the other one that I distinctly remember was Terminator 2. And I just have this memory of like my mum saying, "No, you can't watch it. You'll get nightmares. Don't come crying to me if you get nightmares over this." But I'm pretty sure that we must have seen Terminator 1 and we wanted to see Terminator 2. That's why we were bugging her about it. So I don't understand. And I just think I just have that really distinct memory because it's not that scary.
Yeah.
But I must have been really young, and that's why she was trying to stop me watching it. But
But
it came
you'd
out.
seen the first Terminator already.
I wouldn't have been bugging her to watch Terminator 2
if you hadn't seen
if I hadn't seen Terminator 1, I
Yeah.
think. So I would have been, I was only 3 when it came out, and then it would have been like my dad taped it off the telly. So what would that be, like 5 or 6 years old by the time it's on terrestrial telly
Yeah.
when we were kids? I couldn't have seen it when I was 6. That's too young. I would agree with my mum there. I wouldn't show it to a 6-year-old. But so I don't know how old I was, but I know that I loved it. I've seen it so many times. It's one of those films that rewatching them both, I realised that I've only seen the first one twice, maybe.
Yeah, same here.
Because the second one is so good. It's like when a band has got like one amazing album and you could sit down and listen to one of their other albums and they're all good. Like I've got this with Arcade Fire where I think all their albums are good, but I've listened to their first album like 30 times.
Yeah.
And I'll never really bother listening to the other ones just because I love the first one so much. And it's the same thing with Terminator. Like, why would I just put on Terminator 1 if
When
I've
you
got
could
access
put
to
on
Terminator 2?
the other one, yeah.
But rewatching it, like, I was not surprised, but I was remembering like just how good of a film the first one is.
And critically as well, like Terminator 2, it was up for Oscars and stuff like that at the time.
Did it win any?
I think it got 4 Oscars in the end. It was,
Wow.
I think it was nominated for 6, and then it ended up getting 4. I don't know what the Oscars were for.
It must have got a special effects.
Yeah, I
Oscar.
mean, surely it would have
Yeah.
got the special effects one. But yeah, going from this, what was essentially a low budget action sci-fi film to Terminator 2, which is suddenly critically acclaimed, and then sort of the transition for that, because they lay all the groundwork for the themes and everything in the first film.
Yeah.
But then the way they expand it and the way James Cameron twists everything up in the second one it's so good.
Yeah, I really agree with you on that about expanding it and expanding the universe. As I've said before, I love James Cameron, massive James Cameron fan. And I think I've said before that Aliens is one of my favourite films, favourite sci-fi films. I think that Aliens is a better film than Terminator 2, but I think Terminator 2 is actually a better sequel than Aliens.
Yeah.
Aliens-
I'd agree with you on that one, definitely.
Aliens does something amazing, which is just like completely upend the concept and do something completely different with that universe. But Terminator 2, because it's made by the same director and written by him, and he created this world, there's like real respect and reverence for the universe that the seeds were sown in the first one. There's all these callbacks, and there's definitely an argument to be made about sort of it's a bit ridiculous that this second time travel thing happened.
Yeah.
But you can suspend your disbelief on that pretty quickly, and then it's a really faithful sort of building of that universe.
Definitely. And from what I've like heard as well, initially James Cameron was thinking about having a lot of the concepts written in the second one, in the first one as well.
Like what?
So he was going to have a liquid metal Terminator in the first one.
Oh, right. It's really high concept, that.
Yeah, but obviously the special effects weren't there, so he couldn't feasibly do it. And given the budget he had, there was no way he could do that side of the story. The other thing he was going to do was have the whole, is it Cyberdyne, the name of the company? Yeah, so he was going to have all of that plot in the first one as well.
Right.
He ended up sort of cutting a lot of that down.
That's not too surprising, like in the way that the narrative just works so smoothly between the two films. I think it makes a lot of sense that all that was built up for the first one. Because I was noticing that like there's a particular scene in the first one where Kyle Reese is in the police station and he's like just spewing out all of this information about what's going to happen in the future. He's giving like his history, and that's the biggest chunk of that plot, of that future plot that you get in that first film. He just spews out all of this, what's going to happen. And then we sort of move on, and the police, obviously, they're really dismissive of it. We get his dream sequence, which is really good, but it's more, visual. It's not really about the storyline.
Is that the sort of flashback kind of thing?
He has that. He falls asleep in a car, and he has like a flashback dream, real like sort of traumatized soldier kind of vibe to it. Where the Terminator, not an Arnie Terminator, but a different one, breaks into his little hideout place. And you can see how the visuals of that are perfectly linked into the similar scenes in the second movie. So when the first movie started, I thought it was going to start with a lot more of the future.
Yeah.
Because the second one starts with that, doesn't it? It's got that scene with John Connor as a grown man.
Yeah, it has all of that sort of bit at the beginning, and then it cuts to the kids playing and the traffic in LA. But let's start and talk about Terminator.
Let's talk about Terminator 1.
So Terminator 1. So when was it made again? So it was 1984.
I think it came out in 1984, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's referenced a lot in the second one as well, because they talk about the 1984 incident, because they've got all those shots of Arnie in the police station, haven't they?
So one of the interesting things about this film as well is how low the expectations were for it. So Orion Pictures, which is the company which made it, they'd previously made films like Amadeus and Platoon.
Oh, right.
And they had they wanted to build up this reputation as this really like great film company, and we only make films sort of on this level.
Right.
So they were not bothered by Terminator at all. They were just like, oh, this is just a low budget thing where we can get some money in from it, and it's just an action film. That's all they looked at it as. So basically the film company were not behind it at first.
Really?
Yeah.
So why did they put it out then? If they're the sort of company that are just looking for making a film as big as Platoon or, these grand movies, why did they go with it?
I don't know the exact reason, but I think it's more that they knew they could sell something like this on the cheap. They could do it cheaply, make it, and then that's why they weren't sort of too bothered about promoting it or anything like that.
Fair enough, yeah. So it went on to be like a pretty big success then.
Yeah, it made millions and millions of dollars, sort of given the budget that it had. It easily paid for itself. And then when Terminator 2 came out, it was from a different film company as well, from what I believe. I think it's TriStar.
Yeah, it's a different one. But they're both really like of their time production companies. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, because you don't see them anymore.
Yeah,
do you?
I associate Orion with like those are some big 80s movies.
Yeah.
And then TriStar, I don't really see that name either. That's
TriStar's the one with
90s.
is it the white horse comes flying along?
Did they become Columbia TriStar later, I think, with so you'd see like the woman holding the torch and
that would make sense.
the Pegasus,
Yeah.
I think, alongside each other, which might still be around, but they're not like one of the big studios now, I don't think.
But at the time there must have been so many smaller studios making all these films.
Yeah. And it was a real it wasn't exactly like the breakout role for Arnie, because this did come after Conan, the two Conan movies that he'd done, but it was still right at the start of his career. And I think, not only am I a big James Cameron fan, I love Arnie as well.
Yeah.
I think he is a good actor, not the world's best actor.
But he's an icon, isn't he?
Absolutely. And we're talking about like one of the biggest celebrities ever. He was this big bodybuilder guy, like everyone knew him because he was a bodybuilder. Who's out there now who's a famous bodybuilder?
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing we've got now is Dwayne Johnson.
Exactly.
He's like,
Yeah. I
but
like him in the same way.
Modelled himself on Arnie's career from
Yeah.
what you can see, because he does all these big action roles and he throws in bits of comedy
Yeah.
and this kind of stuff. Because Arnie is the first person to really do that.
Yeah.
And obviously, the way he looks, he stands out. As soon as you see him on screen, he stands out because he's so big.
Yeah, because he's an absolute Hulk. He's a bodybuilder. Yeah. Although I did think that when you see him in these two movies, he looks quite slim, I guess, by bodybuilder standards. Like
Yeah.
if you see him in the 70s and stuff, when he's doing the full-on bodybuilding and he's absolutely bulked out, he's much more, I think, a bit more slimmed down in these films. But he's obviously still like a really muscular, stacked guy.
Yeah,
Which
I
is,
would say definitely by the second one. Still in that first one where you see him emerge from all the lightning after he's done that time jump, he still looks massive and he's quite intimidating looking.
Yeah, definitely. And he arrives in that. So that's how the movie starts, isn't it? Or it's near enough the start. He's hunched over, but it's in a really controlled kind of Greek sculpture position, isn't it?
That's
Where he's
exactly the
kneeling on
kind
the
of
ground.
pose.
And that's really important. That first half an hour of that movie is just built around it's all the cross cutting between Arnie and Kyle Reese. You know, Arnie lands there, or doesn't even land there. He appears there. He materializes kneeling down in this controlled muscular position, whereas Reese, his lightning ball for some reason materializes, 8 feet off the ground, and he just plummets, drops on his side. He's covered in scars that we sort of later learn are actually, war wounds.
Yeah.
But he's still he lands on his side.
And he's in
like,
pain,
"Whoa."
whereas Arnie's just had a lovely time. He's just this statue guy.
Yeah. But moreover, that kind of cross-cutting carries on where we see that scene where Arnie rips out the heart or the guts or whatever of Bill Paxton and his mates. And it's just this incredibly violent scene. That's compared to Reese, who sneaks around. He gets in a chase with some police. He's scrambling. He's a bit more wily. He's got guile.
Yeah. He nicks that guy's pants.
Yeah, which looks a bit dodgy because you don't really see how he got them off the guy.
It's
Then he
just, you
runs
see
off.
you hear this homeless person in the background.
She took my pants.
Took my pants.
But he doesn't hurt that guy. He doesn't hurt any of the cops. He outwits them. He sneaks around. That's
Yeah.
how he works. He manages to steal the cop car without hurting anyone, whereas Arnie's just stomping through the world.
Yeah. He
ripping
comes
up
in
punks.
and he just causes
Yeah.
havoc as soon as he's there.
But I think that's really important for the plot of the movie, which is that you've got the AI creature, which is just a creature of brute force, and he's juxtaposed against the human character that's using his wits to kind of get what he needs and get by just on you see him, I think the scene where Arnie goes into the gun shop, which is iconic, and he's
Yeah.
naming all the things, and he
So
asks for the
good.
phased plasma rifle.
And that's like plasma rifle. He's
Yeah.
asking for a plasma rifle in this 80s gun shop.
Yeah, just what you see, pal. But then that goes straight back to Kyle Reese, who's got the gun that he won out of the cop car with his wits, and he's sawing it down and he's tying it with string to his shoulder.
Yeah.
It's all this like
Like
inventiveness.
makeshift. Yeah, compared to Arnie, who's got all of these guns now.
Exactly. And I think there's a sense of like the human character he's creating tools or using tools to be creative and sneaky. And that's his sort of human intelligent quality, the adaptiveness of it, compared to the machine, which is only capable of just using strength, acquiring weaponry, and just using that brute force and methodical way of doing things.
Yeah.
Reese has to then follow him around, and he won't make a move on Sarah until the Terminator makes a move on Sarah so that he can identify the Terminator.
Yeah, because he's following her down the street and that kind of
Exactly.
thing, and then
He's trying to draw out the Terminator. It's all this sort of human ingenuity is really important early on in the film to set up how is this weak, injured man going to defeat this Terminator? And of course he doesn't. They flip that on its head at the end, and Reese actually dies, and it's left to Sarah to be the creative, inventive human who outwits the machine.
yeah, how they characters change throughout the film as well is quite interesting, because obviously you see Reese starting off this crumpled mess. And then by the end, you find out he's like a hardened soldier and he's been fighting these things for so long. And then obviously Sarah Connor's character arc is, over the course of the two films, she changes so much from this weak waitress who's always getting taken advantage of. Yeah, that whole thing is really interesting to watch.
I mean, there's a really good transformation in Linda Hamilton in the first movie. Like you said, just from the beginning to the end, what she becomes by the end is this survivor, this fighter that she definitely wasn't at the start. But that only goes to like serve what happens in the second film, which is obviously like a lot of people have talked and written about, just, you know, what an incredible physical performance it is from Linda Hamilton in the second film. And it would be good on its own, but it's even better because of the performance in the first film.
So it's interesting as well, sort of like going back to the very start of the film. You've got that scene where you don't really know what's going on. It's the future. It's, what is it, 2029 or something?
I think so.
Yeah,
27 or 29. Yeah.
So it's, we know it's in the future.
Yeah.
You see these tank-like things going along, and the rollers are going over these skulls.
Yeah.
And then when it goes to the present, you're still in this kind of weird dystopian sort of LA. It all looks kind of on the verge of this catastrophe in a way. So
Yeah, it's grimy.
yeah, I mean, the first people that Arnie sees are these punks who look threatening, and the first thing they think about doing is stabbing Arnie.
Yeah.
So it's not a very nice place, this vision of LA, which Cameron's showing us. And the comparisons between that and this sort of Judgment Day future, it's really interesting that they're sort of so close.
And this is such a bleak outlook that he seems to have, really.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Sarah as in her waitress role, the guys which are sort of like she's serving, they're a bunch of pricks.
Oh, they're horrible.
Yeah, they're horrible to her.
There's a
And-
little kid who puts ice cream in her pocket for no reason. I think you can hear the parent like congratulating the little kid. Or something like that.
that's
It's just
it.
awful. Scumbags.
It's just- yes, and all of the other characters are kind of sort of depicted in that way. The only two people who sort of like you feel any sort of genuine emotion towards are Sarah and Reese as it goes on. All of the other characters, you kind of, they do something to make you look at them in an unfavourable light. So like all of the policemen, the first thing, when they hear about the killings, the first thing they say is, oh no, when the press get wind of this, it'll be like a shitstorm. And that'll be a problem for us.
Yeah.
So they're not thinking about the fact these people have been killed. Their first reaction is, oh no, it's going to be a press situation.
Is it? That's a really good
That's
observation.
more paperwork
Yeah.
for us.
I hadn't noticed that. That's really good. Yeah. Do you mean when Lance Henriksen is flagging to his boss that it's two Sarah Connors have been murdered? Right. Okay.
And it's kind of like they're not too bothered about the fact there's these killings. It's more that now that there's two and it's happened on the same day, that's more of a problem for them.
Yeah.
And the same with the psychiatrist guy who comes in.
He's great. It's the same actor in both films.
Same
isn't
actor
it?
in both of them.
He is
but
wonderful.
He's not bothered about what these parrot delusions are.
Yeah.
He's more like, this will be a great paper for me. I can get some great work out of these guys.
Yeah, he's not a very comforting doctor figure that comes in when Sarah's in the police station, is he?
Not at all.
Yeah.
This is great stuff. I could make a career out of this guy. You see how clever this part is? How it doesn't require a shred of proof? And most paranoid delusions are intricate, but this is brilliant.
So we got a nice, I would say, off the top of my head, a good like half-hour segment where it's cutting back and forth between Reese and the Terminator acquiring equipment and, you know, setting themselves up to find Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor rightly is afraid of Kyle because she knows that two Sarah Connors have been murdered and there's a man following her. And we don't know for certain that he's actually a good guy, but with that cross-cutting, we've seen enough to know that one of them is murdering his way to Sarah Connor and the other one's not. So, you know, we've got some empathy with Kyle there and we kind of expect him to be the hero. They meet finally in the club, which is called Tech Noir.
I really enjoyed that as
I
well.
love that as well because it's a bit on the nose, but it's like, what's the genre of this film?
Yeah.
We're calling it Tech Noir.
Yeah, Tech Noir is and it is on the nose, like you say, but it is kind of like obviously what Cameron wanted this film to be.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be viewed more as a sort of Tech Noir than just a simple action film.
Yeah, it's very declarative.
Yeah.
I don't know, we might be reading too much into it to say that it's on the nose. It is good, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's a nice like term. I don't know how much that term had been around before this film came out. So that's where they meet. Obviously, there's that showdown. There's a great scene, a great shot where the Terminator's got into the club and he's looking around, and Sarah drops something and just looks under the table just as the Terminator sort of sweeps his vision over where she's sitting, so he just
Yeah.
misses her. I like that. The tension of that is really well done. And then there's a massive shootout. But what I even liked about the shootout is Reese shoves people out of the way. He's shoving multiple people out of the way. He's still trying not to injure anybody.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, ultimately, why should he care? You know, it really is. In the second film, it's more explicitly like no one matters apart from John, and we have to talk about who's expendable or
Yeah.
not. But Reese, I guess, has grown up in this environment of valuing human life and protecting human life. So he's shoving people out of the way. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. I mean, he does then fire a shotgun into a crowd.
I mean, there is that.
So
yeah.
he would have surely there'd be some spray there. But like, he's going out of his way to not injure any bystanders.
Yeah. The other thing about the showdown in the club is you kind of don't expect it necessarily, because it's very blatant. And at that point, you don't really know if Arnie's going to be subtle about things. I mean, he hasn't been very subtle leading up to that. But he just goes straight for it. There's no beating around the bush. He targets Sarah Connor straight away.
Yeah.
And there's no... That's the thing with him throughout the thing. There's no subtlety.
Yeah.
He'll just... Yeah, whereas Kyle is very, like, sneaky and does this and that. And I think this whole thing about Arnie just being unstoppable and just going straight through things in order to get to his target. And the whole idea of the Terminator is made that much more scary by the fact he can't be stopped and he will just keep coming and keep coming. And yeah, that sort of sets up this whole premise that you can't stop him from the start. Like, he will just
Yeah.
open fire in.
And that's why casting him is so perfect for this, because he is famously, you know, one of the most muscular men in the world. That's what he made his name being, was just being a big, strong guy. So to have that person cast as your unstoppable robot says a lot about the type of robot we're dealing with, how we view the robot. It's not just any humanoid figure. It's bigger than us. It's stronger than us. Even if it wasn't metal underneath, you wouldn't want to go one-on-one with this guy because
Yeah.
he's massive and he's strong. And that's really important in the casting. And that's the whole thing that makes Arnie such a great sort of figure, is that he built his career around that. And I think people might think he's a bad actor because this was his breakout film and he's very robotic. But obviously he's playing a robot,
Yeah.
and he's playing it well. He is monotone, but if you've seen him in other films, he's not always monotone.
Yeah.
That's a deliberate choice.
It's just the character, isn't it?
There's a lot of talk, I think, when this film came out, it was like he only had like 18 lines of dialogue and he got paid a ridiculous amount. And there was a lot of talk about that, like earning that
Yeah.
much money for that little dialogue. I mean, nowadays you've got like God knows what Vin Diesel got paid for the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. where
Yeah,
he just
stuff
says
like that. It's a
one
whole
line.
different.
Um,
But then I feel like Arnie must have put in a lot of work.
Definitely.
Yeah, because it's not just about the dialogue in that film. He, from what I've heard as well, he went to lots of lengths to learn how to use all those different guns.
All right.
And he sort of trained himself to sort of be able to handle that weaponry and do it realistically. And he got put in one of these gun magazines because he did such a good job on
really?
making it look realistic. And he's doing it, he's ambidextrous with it as well. He's got like 2 guns at a time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it's all this extra effort he's gone to make the role realistic, which you wouldn't think about sort of as a viewer. You're not.
And you shouldn't if they're a good actor. And
Yeah.
that is what being a good actor is, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
learning your role. It's not just about the fact that he had 20 or fewer lines. He got himself into that role. He became that monotone, menacing, statuesque, terrifying robot. And he does it really well. And he does it even better in the second film.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, you don't ever doubt him as this terrifying robot. You're constantly sort of a little bit like, when you're watching it, you are afraid for them because you know this guy can't be stopped.
All right, listen. The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine. Underneath, it's a hyperalloy combat chassis. Microprocessor controlled, fully armored, very tough. But outside, it's living human tissue. Flesh, skin, hair, blood grown for the cyborgs.
Look, Reese, I don't know what you want
Pay
from me.
attention! The 600 series had rubber skin. We spotted them easy. But these are new. They look human. Sweat, bad breath, everything. Very hard to spot.
So I think this film has a lot of common lineage with horror movies, and there's a couple of strands of horror that are really tying together in this film. The structure is very much like I was really thinking about Halloween when I was watching it.
Yeah.
It's very similar. You've got your Michael Myers character who is pursuing a young woman. He's an unstoppable, terrifying figure that will stop at nothing to get the kill. We've also got the way Sarah Connor's the last one alive, and she's ultimately the one that has to take arms and kill that
So she's
thing.
like the final girl of this.
Exactly. She
Yeah.
definitely becomes a final girl trope. And it was incredibly similar to that. Halloween in particular was the one it reminded me of. But also you've got so much great body horror in this film.
Yeah, that's
And
a really good point, because it's something you sort of, you bypass all that kind of stuff in your head just because it's known as an action sci-fi film
Yeah.
now. But it has got all these elements of, body horror in general.
See, I think a more action-focused film would not have the scenes where the Terminator's in that scummy, dirty hotel room that he's got.
What
Like, why has
scene?
this robot rented a hotel room?
Yeah, there's no sort of exposition
Yeah.
behind that, which I like, because it's just, you don't really need it. He just
I like
climbs
it.
in the window.
Yeah, I like it because you need those scenes in this film, because that body horror, I think, is a really important part of the man versus machine element. So I think it's happening at roughly the same time in the film. Well, throughout the movie, the Terminator's flesh is rotting away and it's getting worse and worse. He has to wear the sunglasses just to cover up the fact that he's yanked out his own eyeball.
Yeah.
There's flies buzzing around him in that scene because the flesh is like rotting, and he's doing all this self-surgery, and it's really grisly. Now that must be, I might be getting this wrong in my head, but it feels like that's happening at the same time that Sarah's applying the field dressing. It's still quite a grisly wound, but you don't see the wound on Reese. You see the dressing.
Yeah.
So it's more about fixing it. And again, it's humans using their tools and their ingenuity to sort of fix their wounds and get better, whereas the machine just sort of carves chunks off itself so that it can
And again,
continue.
it's like, it's mechanical, it's surgical, the way he's
Yeah.
using the scalpel, and it's very precise.
Yeah.
He's properly going in and having a look at the sort of mechanics of his arm.
Yeah, I love that bit. It's really unnecessary because all he does once he's in his arm is poke a few bits and his fingers move in time. But
Yeah.
it looks amazing. It's
It
really
looks so
grisly.
good. Yeah, so the body horror stuff's very interesting as well, because they make this, so when Reese is talking about the Terminators in general and the machines, he says how now you can't tell the difference between them and other people. And I think he says something like, so they sweat and they bleed and they have bad breath.
Yeah, they
So
look
it's-
human.
Yeah, so with the flies you were talking about, all of that stuff is set up with that. You imagine now, they have got flesh, they've got skin, and that smells. So it's like that is all real on top of all this mechanical stuff.
And that adds another layer of disgust, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's like you can feel the reality of that is supposed to be real human skin over him.
Yeah, because even though it's synthetic, it's
Yeah.
not sort of like, when you think of synthetic, you think of, sort of like nice, like plastics
Yeah.
or something like that. This is real flesh that they've grown. So that adds to the sort of horror of it,
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
it?
creepy and it's gross, and that kind of reaches ahead. So all throughout the film, the Terminator's body is going through stages of decay. It's getting slightly worse. He has to do this surgery to rip his own eye out, and that kind of culminates towards the end. All of the flesh is burnt off, isn't
Yeah.
it? And he rises up from the fire as this terrifying metal
Yeah, 'cause
skeleton.
you finally see what he really looks like.
Yeah, and I completely forgot that Arnie's not in the final act of this movie, because you feel the presence of the character all the way through to the end. Because, and again, this goes down to his performance. He is that Terminator.
Yeah.
So as soon as you see the metal skeleton, you're still watching that character. It still feels like Arnie's on screen because he was embodying that character before. But again, that sense of it looks like us, it feels like us, but it's this horrible, warped version. The grinning metal Terminator is really terrifying.
Yeah, and it's something about it looking like a skeleton as well. So it makes you think about your own sort of mortality.
Yeah.
And like things like Jason and the Argonauts, where you see
Yeah.
skeletons rise up, and it is terrifying.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah, because they like make you think about death, and this is a metal skeleton which doesn't die and is coming to get you. I think there's something, very terrifying about that idea.
So what do they say about it? What's the famous line? Because they repeat it in the second one. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. It absolutely will not stop until you are dead. That's just the sort of mission statement of them. It's terrifying. And Reese compares himself to it, doesn't he? Because she tries to bite him to get away. And he really, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't react, but he's tensing up and he goes, it doesn't feel pain. I do. Don't do that again.
Yeah. But yet there's a bit later on where he says, you can switch pain off.
Yeah.
And he kind of has, in order to fight his machines, he has to sort of give away a bit of his humanity, it almost seems, at points.
Definitely, yeah. Well, he's given up so much. He was raised in when you do get that backstory that he has, it's really horrible, isn't it? He's raised in a concentration camp.
Yeah.
And he had to load bodies into machines to incinerate them.
It's basically and it's almost Auschwitz, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
The
barcodes, he's got the
it's
tattoo.
all sort of harks back to that kind of
definitely.
stuff.
And that's been his whole life. He's really, he's got PTSD, presumably, because he's got those traumatic dreams that he has. And he seems to be able to switch off pain. He's got these horrible memories. He seems to be someone who might have PTSD, which we then see in Sarah in the second one. And we'll get onto that later, but it's another great performance of a PTSD victim.
Yeah, and his PTSD is even more sort of warped in the fact the way he's had to live. I found it very interesting, the fact he's carrying this picture around that John Connor's given him.
Yeah.
And he's become obsessed with this woman, basically. He says, I've been in love with you since I saw this picture. And there's something a little bit disturbing about that as well. So he's basing all of his, he's really fixated on the idea of her.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he meets her. And then, they have that sort of that scene where they conceive John.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's something a little bit...
He's got a very strange view of love, hasn't he? Because he grew up in a concentration camp, loading bodies into an incinerator, and he's holding on to a picture of a woman that he's decided he's in love with because of that, and he's had no real opportunity to find love in his own time because of the world that they live in. But also there's a bit of an element of, John engineered that a little bit, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know how much he forced it, but he did give him a picture of his mum. And on reflection, that's because John knew that he was his dad, and he was obviously feeling something there. But there is an element of, he set that situation up a bit.
And it turns out, at the end, that picture is taken when she's talking to the dictaphone.
Yeah.
And it's when she's pregnant with John.
Yeah.
Which makes it even weirder, because at that moment she's talking about Reese, but it's at that moment the picture gets taken. So, the parallels between that make it even more weird and spooky kind of thing.
Yeah, it's good though. I mean, it works.
Yeah, it works
as a narrative.
Yeah,
but when you dig into
Sarah was really up for it.
Yeah,
she was like, she was like, "Oh, do you have any other girls back home in the future?" And she's there. Yeah, she's properly into it.
They hang a lot on that. She says something like, "We loved a lifetime's worth." They hang a lot on that. It's important for the narrative that we have to really believe that they really felt an awful lot of passionate love in that one night.
Yeah.
Although sort of realistically, there's a lot of stress going on there, and what they were feeling, maybe not what we might. Really
I suppose
see
it's all
love.
amplified. Everything must have been amplified
definitely.
in that. At least in the narrative, that's kind of what you're led to believe.
And I think what you were saying earlier about the way that the world is built is so grimy, and everyone we see is kind of scummy. That does lend itself to them coming together and loving each other, because when you look at the world around Sarah. And look at the world that was around Reese in the future, coming together and feeling anything for another person must be incredibly powerful for those characters.
And I think also because everyone is a bit scummy, the Terminators can sort of slide into that society easier.
Yeah.
Because nobody trusts anyone. Nobody is very nice.
Yeah.
So a prime example of that is where you see Arnie's point of view when he's talking to the landlord or the hotel owner, and he's knocking on the door and he has different options of what to say.
Yeah.
And he goes like, "Fuck you, asshole."
Yeah.
Because that's the most.
They're all just variations of "go away" or "fuck off" or something.
But like this
Yeah.
is sort of how people of that time talk to each other.
Yeah.
Just that's.
And the fact that he's goes in a gun shop and he's browsing 6 or 7 incredibly powerful human killing weapons, and it's just like, yeah, so which one do you want? All of them.
He's like, and the guy's really excited because now
it's a big
he's
sale.
like, I can close up for the day now.
Yeah.
That doesn't last very long.
Yeah. That doesn't work out for him.
Anything else?
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
Hey, just what you see, pal.
The Uzi 9mm.
You know your weapons, buddy. Any one of these is ideal for home defense. So, which will it be?
All.
I may close early today. There's a 15-day wait on the handguns, but the rifles you can take right now. You can't do that.
Wrong.
Have we talked about Arnie's hair?
No, we haven't really talked about that.
So so he starts off with, and he's got his hair all sort of back and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I'd completely forgotten about was that he loses his eyebrows.
I made a note of that as well, and I didn't know what to make of it at first, but it definitely slotted into the kind of decaying body because he looks really, he looks less human.
Yeah,
once the
instantly,
eyebrows are gone, and obviously that is a deliberate choice to burn off the eye to get rid of the eyebrows, isn't it? And it was one of those stages of the human-looking flesh being stripped away to make him look a bit less real.
Yeah, and it sort of it made him look a bit more like a Frankenstein figure. Yeah, that's what I thought. Because suddenly his like defined brows like very obvious, and it's sort of those kind of elements added to the decaying and.
There is a bit of Frankenstein in there, isn't there? The monster. Some of the I think it would have come after, but there was a 1990s Frankenstein. Didn't De Niro play the monster?
Yeah.
And he's done a bit like that as well. He's not like your Boris Karloff kind of thing. It's
I think that's probably what I was thinking of when I saw that.
There are similarities to that, definitely. So Kyle Reese says a line when he's talking about being from the future and explaining himself to Sarah. He says something like, she says, "Oh, are you from the future as well then?" And he says, his response is, "One possible future." And that carries through to the second film with the whole, the future's not set. He says that in the first film, and it's a big thing in the second film. The future's not set. There's no fate but what we make. And I guess those few lines didn't really stick in my head as much when I used to watch these films, because when the third one came out and I watched that, it's not very good. And I remember thinking with the third one and the fourth one, and I haven't seen the fifth one, but there's a sense of like, oh, you should have left this alone.
Yeah.
You should have just let this be. But actually, they do set that up in the first one, that it's all about possible futures.
And you can switch it up.
So
I think the reason the second one works is because they take that original formula, but they twist it up enough to make it interesting.
Well, I don't know. They do. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. They do twist it to make it interesting, but also keeping the same formula. But I think it's just an element of quality. Like I wouldn't have been disappointed in the third one if it had been directed by James Cameron and it was just a better movie. Then all the stuff that contradicts the second one, Judgment Day didn't end up happening, all this, blah, blah, blah. We just delayed it.
Yeah.
I think I'd be all right with that if they were just better made movies.
Yeah.
Because I used to think that the thing that bothered me was, oh, you've contradicted what happened in the second film to get a third film. And, you're just sort of like egging it on. But I think it's just an issue of quality. I think all of those issues are there in the second film. Like I said, why was there a second Terminator? How did this happen when Kyle was going through the machine? What, you had a Terminator on your side? Why didn't you send that?
Yeah.
It doesn't quite make sense, but you just go along with it because they're good films. Whereas the third one's just not. And that's where those inconsistencies, if they bother you, they're not masked over by just being a quality film.
And also, like, whenever Reese talks about time travel, he keeps going, "I'm not a science guy.
Yeah.
I don't know about this."
Again, it reminded me of other films where that's annoyed me. So Looper, there's a scene in Looper where Bruce Willis is trying to explain time travel with some straws or something like that. and it doesn't really make sense in that film. Like, the time travel really annoyed me in that film because it seemed to contradict itself to me within its own story. And yeah, Bruce Willis says something like, don't ask too many questions. You don't have to understand, or something like that. And it's obviously for the audience's benefit. But because I didn't enjoy that movie as much, that scene really stood out for me as just annoying that they just glossed over the inconsistencies. But yeah, when Kyle Reese says it, I'm not a scientist. I don't understand. I'm not a tech guy.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't mind because I love these films. I think they're really good quality.
That's it. And sort of like, I think whenever you start thinking too much about the time travel aspects, it kind of ruins the fun of the film, because you just need to look at it. He's been sent from the future. This is what's happening. If you try and elaborate too much on it, you're going to go in sort of like confuse yourself. So one of the interesting things I think about in this film is how James Cameron constantly refers back to technology and sort of to technology of the time and people's relationship to it. So prime example is Sarah's flatmate, who's always listening to her Walkman.
Yeah.
And she's got such a relationship with that Walkman. That's her bit of technology. So she misses the phone call for the first time from her boyfriend because she's busy listening to music. Then, and they're already setting up this sort of like setting up the premise for what's going to happen later on.
Yeah.
Then you see her when she's having sex with her boyfriend. She's still got the headphones in, sort of like not really paying attention. And then when she goes to make a sandwich, still got the headphones in. And then Arnie comes along, kills her. And then one of the things is there's this close-up of Arnie smashing that Walkman.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like she's quite dependent on that technology. And there's all the colour TVs everywhere.
Yeah. I think it's immediately after he kills them in the apartment, there's a bit of a gag with the answering machine.
Yeah.
Because the phone rings and it's a prank answering machine where it goes, got you, you're talking to a machine. But keep talking, machines need love too.
Yeah.
And he's pointing the gun, I think, at the answering machine because he just hears a voice and he thinks it's someone else in the flat.
That's it. There's lots of bits like that, and like there's another joke in the when you see Sarah being a waitress, and after she's been taken the piss out of by those guys, her friend again comes in and says, "Oh, don't worry, you won't worry about it again in 100 years or something like that."
Yeah.
So so he said you won't think about it in 100 years.
Yeah. That's definitely a really good observation about with the girl with her headphones on, that dependence on technology. It's something that you see in films and TV now an awful lot. Now that we're in a culture of mobile phones, and it was a bit ahead of its time there with that commentary, because part of me would like to see James Cameron saying something about mobile phones, but a bigger part of me thinks that he's missed that window now, because he was talking about it in 1984, obviously, and now for him to sort of talk about technology taking over would be, he's missed the window on social commentary on iPhones now, hasn't he? And he's lined up on Avatar films for the next decade anyway. But
he's very busy.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's already set up all that stuff, and for an 80s film to be thinking ahead to our dependency on technology and all the sort of lovely contrasting shots. So after you see the big tanks from the future, it goes to sort of like oil rigs and diggers and stuff. I think the first shot is so it goes from a tank to a garbage truck, and you see the garbage truck moving up, and it does lots of little flips between that, and then when Reese has the flashback, the sort of like daydream thing, it goes to the diggers. So it keeps showing you these comparisons of these. This is what technology is like in the 80s, but give it a few years, and then this technology could get to a point where it's dangerous for all of us because of our dependency on it.
But I think that's interesting, because I don't think James Cameron is someone who is anti-technology.
Yeah.
As a person, and it does seem like a bit of an anti-technology film, doesn't it? Especially the first one. So it's interesting that that's the message coming out of it. I don't know if he just felt differently in the 80s than he did in the next 2 decades, but he's obsessed with technology, and obviously he's looking at it from a filmmaking point of view, but he's inventing new technology. He's going down to the bottom of the ocean. He is a guy who is interested in innovation. He's not a Luddite.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this is the type of movie that he made so early in his career and had that kind of focus on it.
I mean, on the flip side, it's the machines which help Sarah destroy the Terminator in the end scene.
Yeah.
Because if she hadn't have flicked that switch and crushed the Terminator body, then yeah, she wouldn't have been able to defeat it at all.
Yeah, she uses the machinery against itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's absolutely horrifying at the end when the Terminator kind of is dragging itself along just the torso. That really feels like the culmination of all the body horror of it, because there's bits of like wires and stuff hanging out the bottom of its spine.
Yeah.
That it looks a bit like metallic guts and stuff, and it's just dragging itself along like a zombie, but a metal skeletal zombie. It's really horrifying, and that becomes important for the second film, because that experience of obviously the whole night or 2 or 3 nights that the film takes place is that experience for Sarah, but to really believe the trauma that she's been through to turn her into the person she is in the second film, you've got to see her facing off against this skeleton torso dragging itself towards her. It's horrifying.
Yeah, it's really disturbing.
Yeah.
I've got one interesting fact about the sort of casting.
Yeah, hit me with it.
Have you heard that? So Arnie wasn't the only person who was up for the Terminator role.
Right.
One of the other people who was considered at the time was O.J. Simpson.
Really?
And apparently he didn't get the part because they thought he wouldn't have been believable as a bad guy and was too nice.
I'll give it a few years.
Yeah, so I just read that recently and I was like, oh, interesting.
That is
Very
interesting.
interesting.
I mean, he was because he was a sports superstar, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So he's got the physique for it, I guess, hasn't he?
That's it.
But not in the same way. Just not in the same way as Arnie, as this figure of bodybuilder extremism.
Yeah. And interesting as well, Arnie wanted to be Carl Reese.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I think that's
I don't think he would have been great.
No,
at
it
that.
wouldn't have worked. And then I think the other people which were up for the role of Carl Reese, I mean, this might have been just rumours and stuff, but
Yeah.
I think Bruce Willis and Sting.
Okay, all right.
So those were a couple of people. And I think Gina Davis was potentially going to be Sarah Connor at
She
one
would have been
point.
good at that.
Yeah.
She would have been in The Fly at about the same time as this.
Yeah,
wouldn't
so that would probably, yeah.
she? I could see her being. I think she's a really good actress. Bruce Willis, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. But then he'd be too sort of like too Bruce Willis for the role.
I think. Well, he at this time in his career, it would have been just before Die Hard, wouldn't it? But he was. What made him so great in Die Hard is that he is that kind of scrappy. He's tough, but he's not a typical action hero. He's a bit scrappier. He's very believable as a New York cop in Die Hard. So I guess he could have brought that to Kyle Reese. But I think Michael Biehn is perfect as Kyle Reese. It's so James Cameron's quite loyal with his actors, isn't he? Yeah, he's Corporal Hicks in Aliens, and that's another similar character, isn't it? It's a scrappy, tough guy. He's not the brawniest guy in the crew in Aliens, but he's very much got his head screwed on. He doesn't flip out like Bill Paxton does. And he's the one that kind of holds it together in that film.
Same make.
These were taken at the West Highland Police Station, 1984. You were there.
Same model.
These were taken today.
You have to let me see my son. He's in great danger.
New mission. Once, he was programmed to destroy the future.
You don't know what it's like to try to kill one of these things.
Now, his mission
Get down.
is to protect it.
So I think now's a good time to move on to Terminator 2.
Absolutely.
So this was made in 1991.
Yep.
So from 1984 to going on to 1991, in that space of time, obviously James Cameron's been thinking about this sequel and whether he should make it and whether he can make it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main reasons it got made in that year was the advancements in special effects. So he'd recently made The Abyss, and the sort of special effects in that with the liquid monster alien thing that you see.
He's obviously got like a real interest in just water, right?
Yeah.
Watery images, watery effects. He made The Abyss. When did The Abyss come in between?
I think, yeah, it was about 89 or something like that. I think The Abyss came out.
So he's made that. He's got these. You said that he wanted to make a liquid metal Terminator first of all. So
Yeah, so he's got that idea in his head.
Yeah. He then goes on to explore the sea, and he's inventing all this.
Explore the sea.
Yeah. He's inventing all this technology for.
Have you seen that South Park episode?
Yeah, of course I have.
always
I
think
love
of
it.
that one because James Cameron as this epic explorer who's always trying to do weird and wonderful things. Yeah, so when you say explore the sea, that is exactly what he did.
It's what he did, yeah. If you look on his Wikipedia article, it describes him as, amongst other things, a deep sea explorer. James Cameron is a Canadian filmmaker, environmentalist, deep sea explorer, and philanthropist. What a CV! I love this guy.
What a guy.
You know, and he's developing the technology for Avatar 2 as well. He's still doing all that underwater stuff, isn't he? He wants that whole film to be taking place underwater, I think. And he couldn't do it, so he's created a way to do it.
Yeah,
This
that's
is why I
really
love him.
exciting.
This is
That
why
is
I love
exciting
him.
because, like, I haven't felt too bothered about the other Avatar films. But when you think about James Cameron and the technology that he does, yeah, that does make me feel a bit more excited about it.
I think it's become a bit. I loved Avatar when it came out. I love all his films, and I think it's become a bit cool to shit on Avatar a little bit now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People have turned away from it a little bit, which I haven't done. Like, I understand why people are like, did that film really deserve to be the most profitable film of all time? Not profitable, make the most money at the box office. And that's why people might have turned away from it a little bit. But every time I watch it, I still think it's a really good film. And it sits nicely in his canon as one of his great movies, I think. And I'm excited for the next one. I think, it's been a long time. I think he should have capitalized on that, or it might have been better if he could have got that second film out sooner. But at the same time, he's been spending all this time creating new cameras and new technology. It's gonna be good.
So when you see it, it's just it's gonna be epic.
I've got faith in him.
Well, fingers crossed. I mean, it's just in terms of like how long it's taken.
Yeah.
People forget it takes that long to do all these technological advancements.
Yeah.
And I think if he was doing a bunch of films which we hadn't heard of, you'd be more excited when they came out. But it's just because it's the same sort of story.
Yeah. I trust him.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
So he's taken 7 years away. He made a huge movie in between. He made 2 huge movies in between, didn't he? Because Aliens came out, so it's quite prolific in this period. And obviously, we were just talking about him taking 10 years to make Avatar 2, and he made 4 massive films. I don't know if you could reasonably call The Abyss a blockbuster, but it's a massive epic sci-fi film.
Yeah, definitely. And it has gone down. It's memorable.
Yeah. Thoughtful sci-fi again.
Yeah.
He brought that thoughtfulness with action in the first Terminator, and I don't know if he brought enough action to The Abyss to make it as big a success at the time, but it is a good, thoughtful sci-fi movie.
Yeah, and it was obviously doing those kind of like effects because only that the special effect in the Abyss film doesn't come till the end, does it? With the liquid creature.
Yeah, I think it's quite late on. I can't remember. It's a very long film.
I don't think it's in it very much at all. But yeah, so obviously I'm guessing the studios must have been on his back about making a second Terminator film.
Sure.
So he's got that pressure, but he's trying to wait until the technology's there.
Yeah.
Suddenly the technology's there, and he sort of like begins work on this epic Terminator 2 film. And so this was all shot out of sequence as well. So because I know Arnie had difficulty with figuring out how human to play the Terminator.
Oh, really?
Because everything was shot in different bits.
So I thought that his character arc is really good. I wouldn't have caught on that there was issues with being shot out of sync and him not knowing where he was.
Yeah, I mean he pulls it off really well, and you do properly believe his character again. And so let's start from the beginning of this film. So we've finished on Terminator because I watched them back to back, which was quite interesting as well. So you go from the end of Terminator. Sarah Connor's in the desert. She's pregnant with John, and the guy says, "Oh, there's a storm coming," and she goes, "I know." So it's all this like foreshadowing before we get to the second film.
Yeah, setting up for a sequel, I guess, isn't it?
And then this second film, you initially get all these shots of the sort of dystopian future again, them sort of like firing the lasers. Already, it looks much better, sort of like. Special effects wise.
Does it? Because you watched it back to back, so you saw that more. I had about a week in between. I definitely thought, well, the special effects are better, definitely. But in terms of the future world, I thought there was really good consistency in
Yeah,
how
they
it looked.
still got the same feel. I think it's just a bit more glossy. I think it might have even just been because you see the Terminator, you see that exoskeleton walking around.
Yeah, and it's not all jumpy and Jason and the Argonauts, is it? It's smoother. It looks like a living being.
So it goes from those shots to shots of traffic in LA, kids in the park, and then this fire everywhere, this Judgment Day. And then they've got that beautiful shot of the 4 rocking sort of like park horses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like...
Comes up a couple of times.
Yeah, that's supposed to be like the 4 horsemen of apocalypse.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, so...
I always miss these religious allusions.
I mean, I miss all these bits as well, but it's only because like I like look it up afterwards. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. So it's like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, apparently.
Nice.
And you see an old John Connor. And
we don't see him in the first film, do we?
No, you don't see him at all. You see him like looking through the binoculars in this one. So you've already set up what this character's like. And then pretty soon after that, it cuts to the young John Connor.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about this because I couldn't let it go when I was watching it. I've seen this film so many times and this has never bothered me before. And I don't know if I'm just more of a pedant than I used to be. But how old do you think John Connor is in this film?
Don't know. It's sort of like he feels like he's about 16.
Sure. I think Edward Furlong was 14 or 15 when it was made, and he looks it. And he's riding a motorbike, so you think he's a teenager.
I think he's supposed to be about 12, 13, isn't he?
So there's 7 years between the first film and the second film.
Okay.
We can reasonably assume that it's set a bit in the future from 1991 when it came out, to give a bit of leeway on that. But even then, Judgment Day is happening in 1997. I couldn't get this out of my head that, like, well, where is this sitting? Like, maybe it's like, 1995? That puts him at, it's still only 12.
Yeah.
And I couldn't let that go. It's really bothering me. And then later in the film, the Terminator is describing what's going to happen with Cyberdyne Systems, and he lays out the whole history of Skynet. And he says that in a couple of months' time, Dyson's going to create the chip that's revolutionary. And then 3 years later, Skynet gets the funding and goes online August 1997. And by the end of that month, Judgment Day happens.
Yeah.
So couldn't let it go.
You've been giving this some real thought, haven't you?
Yeah. So we can go back from that this film can't be happening before 1994, meaning that he can't be more than 10 years old. And he's not 10 years old. He's riding a motorbike.
I mean, just suspend your disbelief, maybe.
I couldn't, James.
But,
I
mean, there's that.
I do it all the time.
I mean, there's another one as well. So, like the Carl Reese thing,
right,
when John says, "Oh, my dad hasn't even been born yet."
Right.
Yet,
had he been born?
I think he would have been born before Judgment Day.
Well, he came back from 2029. So, how old do you think Kyle Reese was in the first movie? He could be. I would give him that.
Maybe, but I don't know. I think all of the different timelines get a bit confusing with the ages of people.
I think I do have to let it go, don't I? And the reason I have to let it go...
begrudgingly, really begrudgingly.
Because of exactly what I said earlier about this just being, first of all, just being a quality movie.
Yeah.
And secondly, there's the much bigger issue with time travel, but it's more deliberately done, which is that in this film... Skynet is being created by the events of the first film, which are triggered by Skynet.
Yeah.
There's a full-on grandfather paradox happening, which is more... I actually think that's more forgivable than just messing up the age of John Connor, because it's a plot point. It's explored a lot in those time travel things, and I think if we talk about time travel later on in the podcast, I think we should look at films that do that kind of grandfather paradox.
It's such a tricky thing. Anything where there's time travel, that you're always going to have sort of like slip ups and things like that.
And again, I think that's a big problem with the franchise, which is that you do reach a tipping point where those paradoxes are acceptable, and the quality of the movie has to be so high for the audience not to get completely caught up in it.
Yeah.
And as you keep making films in that series, you're going to keep exposing those paradoxes and potential plot holes.
Yeah. So moving away from the time travel... Well...
I had to get that out, James, because
it's been weighing on you, hasn't it?
It's a 2.5 hour film, and it was the main thing I was thinking about was John Connor's age and how that doesn't line up. Right.
So we're introduced to this John Connor character.
Yeah.
This delinquent.
Yeah.
And we also see a more battle-hardened Sarah Connor. So
Yeah.
like the first time you see her, she's like doing chin-ups. But you also find out she's in a mental asylum.
Yeah.
Which is interesting for her character.
Physically, though, when she first appears, like the transformation of her is amazing.
She is like, she's ripped, isn't she?
And there's, a lot of actors get commended for that. Like Christian Bale gets really raved about for that. But this is an absolute masterclass in reinventing your physical appearance to reinvent a character performance. And again, what I said about tying it works so much better because we've already seen a great character arc from her in the first film. And now she just takes it further. She takes it so much further in the second film. It's an incredible performance. And we should mention, shouldn't we, that at the time of recording this, Terminator Dark Fate is slated.
Yeah.
And it's quite exciting, isn't it? Because it's her first time, Linda Hamilton's first time coming back to the role. They are dismissing Terminator 3 onwards as alternate timelines, which again, they've set up by lines like "No fate but what we make" and "I'm from one possible future." We're accepting that as a possibility in this universe.
So it totally works in the way that these films do.
Yeah, and we're having her come back. She must be in her 60s now, but I'm excited to see. I do like seeing characters age over a long time. I remember when Mad Max Fury Road came out, which I thought was a great film. As much as Mel Gibson's a bit of a very controversial figure at the moment, but setting that aside, I would have really loved to have seen old Max.
Yeah.
Because I love all of those films, and you do see a lot of development of that character over time. And the first one's quite straightforward, quite simplistic in terms of character development. It's a revenge film. And then we see him develop into the Road Warrior, and then he's a bit older and wizened in the third one. I would have loved to have seen him now in his 60s. What's Max doing in that post-apocalyptic world as an old man?
Yeah, there is something about having your main like protagonists come back aged and still doing what they're doing, or they're having to get over some other problem. So like we were talking about Logan, which is based on the Old Man Logan sort of comics and that kind of thing, and that idea of having an old Wolverine come back and then have to deal with these problems that he's doing in that film. I think there is something sort of like very interesting about having that.
I do like it. It really captures the imagination. Has Arnie made that Conan movie yet?
No, but I would love to see him do that.
It's another thing, isn't it, where you can dip back into that world and see, and when the performance is good, you can really imagine the gaps. You can fill in the gaps in your own head. I mean, this is really off tangent, but one of my favourite characters of all time is Alan Partridge.
Yeah.
Because part of what makes it so funny every time you see a new Alan Partridge thing is that you've got 20 odd years of context of that character. You know what he's going to say, or you've got an idea of what his reaction might be to a certain thing. So, and you can fill in the gaps of what's been happening in his story in between. And sometimes they'll fill it in for you, but it's really satisfying when those franchises play out.
On the flip side of stuff like that, you've got, that Sylvester Stallone's doing a new Rambo film.
Is he?
Yeah, so he's doing Last Blood.
Okay.
As opposed to First Blood. So it's sort of drawing the line between it being interesting and not just running a franchise into the ground just because for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Because obviously Terminator's going to have an instant audience. I mean, the other sequels have all had instant audiences.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is more interesting as well because James Cameron's on board as well.
Well, he's on board, but he's not directing.
Yeah, and it's the guy who did Deadpool who's directing.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I think that should it's just the danger of it being too Deadpool-y.
He's producing and he's co-writing it, isn't he, Cameron? So that's good. And he's picking up from where he left it. And he cares about this franchise. It kind of reminds me of there was a Neil Blomkamp was slated to do a sequel to Aliens that was going to write off everything in between.
That kind of got ditched, didn't it?
Yeah, it got dropped.
That sounded really interesting.
Either Prometheus or Covenant or one of them.
You sound like you really like those films.
I just think it's a shame that we didn't get to see Neil Blomkamp pick it up. I think he could have done something interesting with it. Although I think he was going to write off Alien 3, and I actually really like that one. I know a lot of people
prison one.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm actually really fond of that. I don't think it's perfect.
It's got the dog bursters in, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think it's cool. Anyway, We can talk about that another time, I'm sure.
So, back to Terminator 2.
Back to Terminator 2, we've seen John Connor, we've seen Sarah Connor, and we're also seeing the arrival of the Terminator.
Yeah.
And it's played very, very similarly to the first film, isn't it?
Yes.
He arrives in that statuesque kneeling pose. He goes and finds bikers this time instead of punks, but it's still, leather jackets, violent guys. And he beats the shit out of them.
Yeah, but there's
takes their clothes.
It's instantly got more of that sort of comedy aspect to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's very sort of subtle to start off with, but Arnie's character throws one of them onto a grill.
Yeah.
And then the guy's going, ow, 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 you're burning my hand.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And it's
I
got
guess so,
little
yeah.
bits like that.
I think what I was reflecting on a bit later into the movie, I was trying to remember that first scene. I don't think he doesn't kill any of those bikers, does
No.
he? He decks them.
sets that up.
He lays them out, and he's very violent, but he doesn't kill anyone. And that's crucial, isn't it? Because later he's going to be told that he can't kill anyone. And that's quite an important part of his character arc.
But it's interesting they make sure that he doesn't kill anyone in that first scene.
Definitely, because at that point, we know that he's got no qualms about it, because later on he almost kills someone.
Yeah.
And he was quite happy to do it. So it's quite important that he doesn't need to kill anyone to get their bike and their clothes.
What is the line? What is the exact line?
I need your boots, I can't remember. I need your boots, your jacket, and your motorcycle.
Fantastic.
Is that it? I can't let you take the man's wheels. He snatches the gun off him. I love it.
Straight away. And then the first thing, again, the comedy thing.
Yeah.
He takes the sunglasses off of him.
So
Brilliant moment. Because he doesn't have to.
No.
He decides, actually, I want these.
Yeah. And then it plays Bad to the Bone.
Yeah. Bad to the bone.
Yeah.
Oh.
It is a bit, there's definitely some humour there. And again, because in the third one, he does a similar thing, doesn't he? And he gets some pink star-shaped sunglasses, or I think he snatches them, or I think he decides he doesn't want them or something. It's a little reference to that one. And I found that so cringy when I saw the third one. And again, it's it's the same joke. The only reason I find it cringy is that the film's not good enough to support cringy jokey bits.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
You forgot to say please.
Also, at this point, if you go in not knowing what this film's going to be about, you assume that he's still sort of the evil Terminator, which is what they set up in that beginning bit anyway.
Yeah. So we definitely need to talk about that, because we never really had the benefit of the context. I don't know how this film would have been marketed, and I don't know what audiences were going in expecting when they first saw it. Did they know that Arnie was going to be the hero character this time or not? Because it seems to be, the way it plays out is you shouldn't know that at the start, and it's a massive flip, and it really plays on your expectations.
It works really well, and it's the whole thing, the whole beginning bit works like that, because then you've got the T-1000, who you don't know is the T-1000 at the time.
Yeah.
When he comes down, he already seems like Kyle Reese. He's smaller of stature.
Yeah.
He's sort of lean, and he's more articulate than Arnie was.
Yeah, he talks with an American accent, and he talks a lot.
Yeah.
Much more than Arnie does, yeah.
And he's very, he does emotions in the way he says stuff. He's very sort of none of his dialogue is sort of stunted.
Yeah, there are hints to it though, isn't there? It doesn't. So it calls back a bit to the first one in that he's a bit sneaky.
Yeah.
Again, he fools a cop so that he can steal the cop's car and then go and seek out John Connor. But you do get a little hint in that when he first arrives, he's kneeling in a similar position. He doesn't collapse on the ground like Reese did. And also, he kills that cop. You don't see the blade. I think you hear a stereotypical shing blade noise.
Yeah.
But he sneaks up behind him and he kills him.
Does he definitely kill him? I'm not sure if he...
I think, I guess that's a good point. I think with the benefit of hindsight, you know that cop died.
Yeah.
I think the way it might play out in the scene is that it looks like he punches him in the stomach, but there might be a bit of a blade noise. So actually, fair point. Yeah, it might not be clear if he's dead.
But when you first see it, you don't really know either way.
Yeah.
And also, they've set up the bit at the beginning where they've said, as before, it came down to two time travelers, two warriors, one warrior on our side, one on theirs, and you don't know who's who. You assume Arnie is the bad Terminator at this point,
and that continues for on, and yeah, you're right. He's the T-1000 is a lot more articulate. Robert Patrick's amazing in this film.
Really good.
He's so scary.
Yeah.
I think
His
he's
movements and everything.
Yeah, I think he's as scary as Arnie is in the first film in a completely different way. It's a totally different Terminator and it's a totally different performance. But he's so like he's got cunning and guile in a way that the first Terminator didn't have in the first film. He sneaks around, and that's inherent in his ability, is that he morphs into other things. He's got a chameleon aspect, a sneaky, more of an infiltrator.
Yeah.
Which is what the Terminators are supposed to be, isn't it? They look like humans to enable them to infiltrate places.
And it's kind of, if you compare them, they're like very different, like almost horror serial killer characters. So you've got like Arnie in the first one, who's like a Jason, and then the T-1000 in this one is more sort of like a serial killer, which you would like know.
Like a real life serial killer.
Yeah, like a real life serial killer. So it's kind of like that. It's got those kind of aspects to it as well.
Yeah.
We don't know that Arnie is on John Connor's side until that bit in the mall, do we?
Yeah, it builds up. It's very similar to the scene in Tech Noir, but it's not. It hasn't got that layer of Tech Noir visuals to it. But it's the same thing where both of the Terminators meet, or both of the future characters meet in the same type of scenario, and there's a shootout. But that build up, and again, like I'd love to have been able to see this film without any knowledge of its context, because I would have certainly seen it years after its release. And that moment so Arnie's got a gun in a roses box.
Yeah,
I think.
the roses box is brilliant because you see him carrying it about.
It's very 90s.
Yeah.
I realise now looking at it, it reminds me of like John Woo kind of.
Yeah, and there's a film
filmmaking.
called Assassins. All right. With Sylvester Stallone. I swear they do exactly the same thing.
Stomping on the rose. It's so like overly dramatic.
But yes, you see him coming forward, and then, but also why has he got like a roses box? Not like chocolates, but
to disguise the gun, right? For whatever reason.
It's just like it's an element which is really, in hindsight, it's a strange thing to think of. Like if you think in realistic terms, which you shouldn't do when you look at these films. But yeah, the fact that it's a very deliberate choice to use like a box with roses in.
Yeah, a box that is the same size as a shotgun that contains roses.
Yeah,
which I don't think is a thing.
And I mean, I don't know if there's something in the weird symbolism of a rose looking like, and then the thorns or something wanky like that. But yeah, who knows?
Almost certainly.
Almost certainly. But at the end of the day, it comes that great showdown scene where he pulls out that shotgun, and you think, oh no, John Connor's about to get shot, or at least that's what you should think. And this other guy who's a policeman as well. The fact he's a policeman,
that's important.
And it's on the car that he's driving around. It says to protect and serve.
Yeah,
and this is another sort of like harking back to the first film, because when Arnie gets in one of the cars, there's a shot, and you see that same to protect and serve sign.
Right.
Where yet he is the Terminator, and he's going to kill people, and that's his job.
Oh, right, okay.
So it's kind of
I missed
like
that in the first one.
So that's almost like a little.
All these little callbacks are great, and it's what makes it such a great sequel, because it's that real love for the first movie, because it's his own thing, James Cameron's own thing. So dropping in little things like that, it builds the world, it makes connections, it's a nice reference. All of those things work so well because he made the second one and the first one.
It just all matches up really nicely.
Yeah, and it builds up to that moment where actually the Terminator is here to protect John, and he starts shooting the other Terminator, and we see this weird the silvery wounds appearing on the T-1000.
Yeah, which already seems really like strange.
Yeah,
you're like, why has this happened? But you clearly know that he's an enemy now.
Yeah.
So Arnie's got these sunglasses on in that scene. He doesn't take them off until he meets Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
So when you finally see the Terminator and Sarah clocks him, he's coming out of this lift or coming out of this door.
Yeah.
And she is terrified.
Yeah.
She is having all those flashbacks of this.
Rightly so.
Yeah, this like half-bodied exoskeleton coming towards her, and all the sort of trauma she's had from there. But they've already set her up as this really tough character. But as soon as she sees him, she's like on the floor crawling away. And going back to the sunglasses, he takes the sunglasses off, and then he says the line, "Come with me if you want to
Yeah,
live."
he says Carl Reese's line.
Yeah. And there's something very important about him suddenly looking into her eyes with his eyes.
Yeah, it's part of the humanizing. Of the
Yeah, so it's
character.
humanized him instantly for her because he would never have taken the sunglasses off before. So that's like a really nice moment where you kind of like this character is switched, and then the sort of he's now aligned with what Carl Reese was doing in the first one.
Yeah. That's a really good observation. I hadn't clocked it. That was a really good thing to notice. And there's your reason for why he snatches the sunglasses out, which seems pointless. And it could just be, it looks cool and we'll have this bad to the bone moment. But actually, there's a great moment to set up with eye contact later on.
Because again, it's this dehumanizing thing where you can't see someone's eyes, which is...
And before, those sunglasses were used to cover up the eye surgery that he'd done on himself in the first one. Yeah.
Come with me if you want to live.
It's okay, Mom. He's here to help. It's okay.
So we see some important stuff about John Connor as well, that he's a tech whiz already. He's a delinquent.
Yeah.
But he's using his ability to manipulate machines. He steals money out of the ATM by hacking the PIN code.
Yeah, which is just mad, the fact he can do that.
Of course, yeah, it is silly. But
he also says, this is something my mum taught me.
Yeah.
So we know that he's got this background knowledge of stuff.
Yeah, and it's also setting up a character arc for him that isn't what you'd expect when you see that grisly, battle-hardened John Connor from the future. He looks like a military leader there, but actually we can see that he's maybe going to become that leader because he knows how to manipulate the machines. It's not just a warrior that he's becoming. He's got this level of intelligence.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw in the first film that enabled the humans to overcome the machines. Sarah uses the machines against themselves to destroy the Terminator.
And that becomes so prominent in this film.
Reese is able to get his equipment in a sneaky, intelligent way instead of brute force. That's the character that we're seeing in John now. He's smarter. He's going to outwit people. He escapes on his own merits and stuff. He's not a brute force type of leader.
Yeah, which is something you kind of like you assume that he would be, but because the fact he sent is it the T800 or something like that? Is that what they refer to?
I had to
Arnie
look
as?
this up because he's
so it's T100.
He's a T101.
T101 in the first one.
He calls himself a Model 101.
Yeah.
But there's some deleted scenes or something that he's actually a 800 series Model 101. So he's both a T800 and T800 in the sort of wider universe stuff, sequels and comics and all that, makes sense because the rubbery skinned ones, which I don't think we see in this, I think that's only in the special edition deleted scenes maybe. We do see a rubber skinned Terminator, but that's the...
Yeah, because they talk about that in the first one, don't they? They
I'm
said
sure
initially
we see
they
one.
were rubber skinned.
Or maybe that's in one of the sequels.
I think it's in one of the sequels.
But that's a T650, and then we get the T800, that's Arnie.
Yeah.
And then it's assumed that Model 101 is the Arnold Schwarzenegger looking one.
That would make sense.
So T800 means it's a metal skeleton covered in human flesh. That's T800. Arnold Schwarzenegger within that is the Model 101. And then you've got, presumably there's other
like
Terminators.
the guy in the first one who's in the flashback.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a T800, but a different model. And then you've got your T1000, which is an upgrade on that.
See, this is really good knowledge to know because, I was trying to figure out all the different serial numbers.
It's
when
the
I was
kind of
watching
stuff
it.
I love. Yeah.
It's good though. It's
I want to
good.
know what the model numbers are and what it means. And there's because they did that weird sequel that I haven't seen that's just like 10 minutes long, and there's a T1 million in that.
I've not heard about that.
It was I think James Cameron was involved, and it's got Edward Furlong and Arnie, and it's just for a theme park ride. It's a movie and a theme park ride in the 90s.
Yeah.
Battle Through Time or something like that. I can't remember the name of it.
It's like at Universal Studios or something.
I think that's right, yeah. And they fight a big spider, I think. And it's like, I think it's a liquid metal spider.
Yeah.
I think they call it a T1 million. That's all I know about it. It's like 10 minutes long for this ride, and I've never seen it. I think
That's interesting, that sort of...
It's probably on the internet now, but I think back in the day you could only see it if
Yeah.
you went to that theme park and went on the ride.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's the world of the 90s. So yeah, that's the kind of character he is. He's able to manipulate machines and stuff.
Yeah, and he sent this... So the future him has sent Arnie back, or a version of Arnie, not the same one we saw in the other film, but like another model like that. And he sent him back to help him battle this T-1000, this liquid metal Terminator.
Very silly, very silly, but
very
great.
silly.
It's a mimetic polyalloy. Is how
looks like
Arnie
mercury,
describes it.
doesn't it? That's kind of what it's
they
modelled
definitely
on.
they definitely use mercury. I think later in the film when we see the actual liquid, that must be mercury.
Yeah, you would have thought so.
Yeah,
It's the transitions between looking completely human and then going to the T-1000, and the way they mix the special effects with all the sort of live action effects as well, like the realistic ones. There's some crazy bits, like when he gets sliced up and there's like half of him dangling on one side, and he's been shot full of bullet holes, and his head's like hanging off. That it's like John Carpenter's The Thing. There's lots of bits which look like that kind of technology, and
especially right at the end.
Yeah,
we'll come back to that because I want to come back to that because that's really interesting.
Again, it's that body horror aspect, isn't it?
It is body horror, and he makes a noise when that happens to him. He makes a screeching noise, which is horrible.
Yeah,
and that's a really important thing that links it back to the body horror of the first one, and it's important for dehumanizing that figure to make him more monstrous and more scary.
Because they've done so much with the Foley for this film as well. Like, apparently the Foley is really extensive in terms of doing all the different sound effects. So apparently, do you know the bit where the T-1000 goes through the fence?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And it sort of like slides through.
I mean, the gun gets caught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently that sound is some dog food being squeezed out. And like things like the leather jacket that Arnie's wearing, there's like bits where that sound is amplified and that's something else.
Oh, okay.
And even the his shotgun stuff is apparently the sound of a cannon rather than... So they've gone into such depth to make everything more action and more sort of explosive,
a more heightened
so the whole thing.
Yeah.
So apparently the Foley was really extensive, probably as extensive as the special effects, but you just wouldn't think about that normally.
I think that's what makes it such a perfect blockbuster. It's that attention to detail in all elements of production that make it such a high quality film. And stuff like Linda Hamilton putting all that work into her performance, that's what sets it apart as a good movie. It is, like you said, attention to detail in things like the Foley. Every element matters in making a film of this scale. So to have a really high quality one, you need the best Foley artist available. You need Linda Hamilton to completely transform herself physically, completely dive into the role. All of those things are crucial. So after they've met up and he's kind of introduced himself, he explains what he is and he's from the future, and John Connor accepts it pretty quickly. We have that scene where they have a fight with a couple of guys.
Yeah, this scene is brilliant.
It is a great scene. Did you call moi a dipshit? put your leg down. Because he told him to stand on one leg.
Yeah.
And there's that little thread of humour that's in it. But it builds up to this really important moment, which is where John Connor thinks it's all fun and games. He's got his own personal Terminator to beat people up for him. And then he whips out a gun and he's going to shoot this guy in the face.
Yeah.
And it's suddenly like, whoa, pump the brakes. And we have to have this conversation about you're not allowed to kill. And he sets some rules, but the Terminator just doesn't understand. He's just like, why?
Yeah,
I'm a Terminator.
And that's very important as well with the fact that this Terminator sort of is learning stuff later on. So they have that whole scene where they take out the chip from his head, and apparently he's just on read mode or something like that.
So yeah, he's I was really looking at that and really interested in that scene because I hadn't paid a lot of attention to that scene, I guess, in past viewings. But looking at it from the AI perspective, he says it's a neural net processor I can learn, but it's switched to read only, so I don't learn. And then I think Sarah Connor says something like, "Oh, Skynet doesn't want you thinking too much." No. So they take it out and they're going to flip a switch. And that's the turning point, isn't it, for the character? That's where John wants him to start learning. And that's the key difference between John and Sarah in this movie, isn't it? Sarah's, I guess, she's had this amazing character arc, but the end of that arc is handing over to John and accepting that John sees the machines differently to her. She accepts it through the movie, but that's kind of the end of her character arc, I guess, really, in these two films anyway, is that she accepts that John sees the machines in a different way to her. She wants to destroy that chip once it's out, even after he saved her life in the asylum mental institution. She's still like, I think it's just best we get rid of this.
Yeah, because she's terrified of technology, whereas John is using it to his advantage in all these different scenarios.
Yeah. So he wants to change the Terminator. He thinks, I can learn. He sees something more in the Terminator than just a mindless killing machine.
Yeah, because he hasn't had all that experience.
He hasn't had this awful, traumatic experience with a Terminator. He just knows the stories that his mum's told him, but he can still see beyond that.
Yeah.
So he wants to flip that switch and allow him to learn, and that's when the T-800's character arc starts. So we've set it up. He hasn't killed anyone yet, so that's important. He's not a murderer, basically. But from this point on, he's going to be slowly learning, and John's trying to just teach him silly little things, really, like slang. If you're going to smoke someone, you say "hasta la vista, baby."
Yeah, that's it. Again, all these like lovely little catchphrases which have just sort of like gone into popular culture now. Because we didn't talk about the infamous "I'll be back" line from Terminator. So like that, when that first, and the thing is, they use lines like that again in this one, but they flip them on their head. So like in that first one, he says "I'll be back" when he's in the sort of like reception area for the police station.
Yeah.
And they say, "Oh, just wait, sit down, and take a seat." And he's looking around. And he goes back.
Yeah, it's just an innocuous line, meaning if I can't talk to her now, then I'll come back later.
Yeah, but it's made all that more sort of memorable because the next thing he does is drive that car through the front of the building.
Yeah.
And again, they flip it with this one. So instead of sort of like being a kind of threatening "I'll be back," in this, later on when they're in the Cyberdyne office, Arnie says, "Don't worry, I'll be back."
Wait here, I'll be back.
Yeah, so it's not...
It's reassuring and protective.
Yeah, and again, it's that sort of amazing thing that Cameron's doing. He's referring back to his other film, but everything is flipped. So whenever something happens again, it's in a different way. So Arnie said two lines meaning a different thing in this film.
Yeah.
And his character is a different kind of character. Because I know this... So another thing Terminator is very famous for is Arnie was voted best villain and best hero in the same poll.
Right, okay.
So he's sort of like he's both these characters, and if you look at these two films, it's so different how they've changed that look of what he's like in the machine.
Yeah, definitely. And his body gets damaged a lot, but he's more like a battle-ravaged warrior in this film than a rotting, decaying corpse.
Yeah.
So when we see bits of the Terminator's flesh underneath him by the end of the film, it's a lot less horrifying than when we saw the metal skeleton in the first movie dragging itself along like a reanimated corpse. Here we're seeing a character that's just like pushing on through adversity rather than, being an unstoppable killing machine.
And again, it's to do with all of the emotion you kind of get towards him, because you see him learning all these things. And there's that amazing scene in the desert where Sarah Connor's talking about how she suddenly realizes the Terminator will never be like all these other father figures she's had for John in her life. He'll never get drunk and then beat him. He'll never be too busy to play or something like that. He will always be there. He'll be relentless. And they flipped it. So like it's the same can't be stopped creature from the first one, but now he can't be stopped. But he'll always be there. It's not a threatening can't be stopped. He'll just always be around for you.
Watching John with the machine, it was suddenly so clear. The Terminator would never stop. It would never leave him. And it would never hurt him. Never shout at him or get drunk and hit him or say it was too busy to spend time with him. It would always be there, and it would die to protect him.
Yeah, so the essential dialogue that's happening between this movie and the first movie is that the attitude towards technology has changed. So the first film really, we do use machinery to destroy machinery, but none of that machinery is seen in a good way. You were talking about the headphones, that woman's completely obsessed with listening to her headphones and it gets her killed. And everything's grimy and unpleasant, this world. But in this film, we see that the attitude's changed a bit. Technology can be reprogrammed, and it's somehow reprogrammed into the perfect father figure in Sarah Connor's eyes. And this woman who had this traumatic experience with the same thing can finally accept that actually we can use this technology and we can work with it, and it's something we can get along with.
Yeah, yet there is still this sort of menacing figure coming to get them the whole time. Although there is that big long chunk in the middle of the film where the T-1000 is kind of like lost track of them. So it's not it's not still this unstoppable thing that's coming to get them constantly.
Yeah, in fact, he doesn't actually manage to get back on their trail until they make a mistake in that Sarah Connor wants to go and do something about Cyberdyne, which is like a whole extra plot in this movie, isn't it? That happens in the middle where she goes off on her own. It's what leads them ultimately to the Cyberdyne offices. And I think the T-1000 probably just overhears it on a police radio, maybe?
Yeah, that's literally it.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing where Sarah Connor goes after the guy who's behind this Skynet, creates the chip that creates Skynet, that creates the end of the world. So she essentially becomes the Terminator herself at this point, because she's going after him and she's killing him before he can do something that will affect the future. And so she's just filling the same role that the Terminator was in the first bit.
Yeah.
And she was sort of like, in the first film, she's like, why is he killing me for something I haven't done yet?
Yeah.
Yet she doesn't realise she's doing it again in this scenario. So it's and then when she does finally realise what's going on, then she kind of sees this guy. He's not the evil genius that you think he's going to be. He's, as soon as she tells him, as soon as he finds out what he's potentially going to do to the world, he's really remorseful. Yeah. And he's like, oh no, he says, I feel sick.
That's brilliantly set up as well, because the first time we see, or not the first time we see him, but we see him at home with his wife, and it's a fairly short scene, but he's he's not spending enough time with his family, but he's justifying it to his wife, and he's explaining, oh no, it's revolutionary. But the way he puts it is, imagine a pilot that never gets tired. You're looking at it.
Yeah.
So we understand very quickly his motivation. He doesn't see, and he has no reason to see, the potential disaster that he's building up to. He's really creating something to benefit humanity, and he truly believes that. He's happy with that. And then obviously his world gets turned upside down when Sarah shows up. And you're saying that she's turning into a Terminator as well. She has another transformation about halfway through the film when they go to her Enrique, is that his name? Go to her friend's
something like that.
place. And then she appears in her black vest.
Combat gear.
Yeah, combat gear, exactly. She's a soldier now. And you're like, whoa, she means business. Wherever she's going, and she slings her gun into the car. She drives off and she's just ignoring John. Exactly, yeah, like a Terminator, like a robot.
And she's got I think she's got sunglasses on as well. She's got just
the type of sunglasses that in the 90s I thought were really, really cool. The little round ones with the side bit, goggles.
It's interesting you bring up the office scene as well. Not the office, the home scene.
Yeah.
So Miles in that scene shows that he can just leave the technology behind, even though he's so obsessed with it and with creating this thing which could potentially benefit mankind in his eyes. When his wife comes over and says, surely you can take a break, and then sort of like, you've got these kids to look after. And then as soon as he realises, he shuts the computer down and then goes and plays with his kids. This thing that he's making is not the be all and end all of his life.
Yeah, there is a version of that character that they could have done where he does dismiss his family and he is the obsessed scientist, and they wouldn't have been able to convince that character to join their side, would they?
Yeah.
It needs to be a family man who has something more important than the technology that he's developing, and he can see the value of the humanity around that. And that's why they can actually sell him on the idea of, let's go and destroy this before it goes any further. Destroy your life's work.
Yeah.
Because we have to.
And then he just goes and does all that. And then in the end, he sort of sacrifices himself almost. He gets shot up by all the policemen.
Yeah.
Or the SWAT team. And there's that moment where he's still trying to hold on to the detonator. And he tells the SWAT team, like, look, I don't know how long I can keep hold of this.
I
And
love that moment.
It's really intense because he's breathing and he's panicked breathing.
Yeah.
And then you just hear it get slower and
Yeah.
slower. And then he drops it, and then there's that massive explosion, and it's just such like an intense moment that they put in there.
It's really iconic, and it's a classic example of James Cameron at his best, where he is tying in a massive, cool explosion that is underwritten by important emotions and a good emotional performance that means a lot, and the audience understands what it means. He's blowing up his life's work. He's sacrificing his life to do so. He's at the same time giving warning to the cops who are innocent in this. He doesn't want anyone to die. He's giving them warning to get out, and then he's finally ends in a massive cool explosion.
So yeah, again, it's James Cameron showing humanity in a different light to how he showed it in The Terminator. In here, you see characters who are genuinely good in a lot of ways. You see him, you see Sarah's friend who's in the desert and his family. You see lots of families.
I think it's a much more hopeful film, even though throughout most of the film, Sarah's not a very hopeful character. She's lost a lot of her humanity in what's happened to her. I do think it's a more hopeful film, but there's a really interesting line where, and you're saying we see a lot of families. One of those families is the two little kids who are playing with guns. And John says,
that's a very good point.
John turns to the Terminator and says, "We're not going to make it, are we? Humans." And that's a bit of a weird line, especially to come from John, because John is prepping to be the savior of mankind, basically.
Yeah.
And that's his attitude, is that like he doesn't have, in that moment anyway, he doesn't have a very hopeful outlook on humanity. And again, it's sort of stretching out the franchise a bit to suggest that actually Judgment Day is a bit inevitable. We're trying to stop it in this film, and we ostensibly do by the end of the film, but obviously the story goes on in the sequels. And
also the whole idea of Skynet is, so Skynet's the computer which wipes out humanity.
Yeah.
It says it became self-conscious in blah, 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 whatever date that is. As soon as it became self-conscious, it made the decision that humanity wasn't worth keeping around.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that it came up with that conclusion. So it's
still seeing the same things we saw in the first film. The humanity's not so great. And obviously James Cameron still holds a little bit of that belief in the second film to put that line in with John, we're not going to make it. And Skynet ultimately makes that decision.
And that's the most terrifying thing to think about. I think that's what makes these films even more scary, because it isn't that far off realistically. I don't think it can be. It could happen. It's inevitable.
Well,
computers are getting smarter and smarter.
Yeah.
And as soon as you create something which is smarter than what we are, and is self-aware, then that is a frightening.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about in Blade Runner, that Roy Batty is this slightly more advanced version of a human, and then he looks down on his creator, the Frankenstein's monster, looking back on his creator in disgust. It's the same thing. As soon as Skynet gets up and running, it just wants to get rid of humanity. And also it does that by very easily turning humanity on itself. It launches a nuke on Russia, knowing full well, and the movie was made in 1991, tail end of the Cold War, although it still would be true if that happened. But that was a much more prevalent threat, which was Russia's going to strike back immediately, and then that's the end of the world. That's done. Everyone will die off the back of that, or a significant amount of the population. So it's playing on that existing fear that as humanity, we can't really trust each other, and we could easily destroy ourselves at the flip of a switch quite easily.
And then that's very interesting when we look at The Day the Earth Stood Still, and we chatted about how they give Gort that power to police the universe.
Yeah, luckily, Gort doesn't decide to do what Skynet.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's kind of like those. It's becoming a theme now in science fiction.
Yeah. And does Skynet do it in retaliation? Does he say something like they try and turn it off?
And turn it off once they figure it out. So again, it's like how?
It's like how. It's a bit like what the machines do in the Matrix. We give them too much power in that story, and then they strike back and they completely take over. It's giving over that power to a machine and having that trust in that AI. Yeah, like HAL, like Gort. That's a common thread in these AI films, is that they are better than us, more intelligent than us, and we're handing over control to them, and it's whether or not that's going to go badly for us.
And then, especially in this film, they make the the main thing they're talking about is, okay, so this could happen, but if you had artificial intelligence with emotions or had some sort of idea of morality, and this is what John is teaching the T-800. He's teaching him what it's like to be human, feeling these emotions. There's that scene where he says, why do you cry, or something like that.
Yeah, and John can't quite articulate it. He just says, because it hurts. It's when it hurts inside.
And then Arnie responds with, well, we don't feel that. So like, how can he relate to what you're doing and what you're feeling?
Yeah, but obviously there's great payoff of that at the end when he actually says that he does understand why they cry, but the problem is that, well, he says it's something that I can never do, meaning that you've taught me about emotions, but I just don't have them. It's inherently, I don't have emotions, and that's why we need to get rid of him at the end. That's why we're going to lower him into the steel, because that threat still exists, because he's not human. He's started to understand emotions, but it's never really going to be there. So maybe
you took that a lot more deeply than I did. I was literally like, oh, it's just 'cause he can't cry. He literally can't cry. But I think the way you're thinking about it is the correct way of thinking about it. I just looked at it very surface layer.
He definitely does mean that. It's something that I can never do. I don't have tear ducts.
Yeah, I didn't get that entire, because that's exactly what he's saying, though.
Yeah, he's saying that I'm never going to be human. I'm still a threat to humanity. We need to cut me out.
Yeah, and I mean, even though he's got all these like lovely little catchphrases now that he's learned, he says like "no problemo."
Yeah,
and he seems more human.
So some of that, I think some people think that "Hasta la vista, baby" is quite a cheesy line, but the moment it comes in the film is towards the end, and John's trying to teach him slang early on, and he says, when you're going to smoke someone, you say "Hasta la vista, baby." And he does that. He smokes the T-1000. He shoots him and he shatters him into pieces. It's a cool, badass action line, but it's also showing us that he's learning from what John's taught him. John's teaching him slang. This is him using it appropriately. He has learned to be a bit more human.
I think the best example of him trying to be more human, and the most hilarious example, is the bit when he's trying to smile.
I love the bit when he's trying to smile. I texted you the photo of it off my screen.
So good. So good.
That's great. And I think you also see in that moment, and you see it a couple of times, which is that he obviously doesn't smile very well. And he can see in John's reaction that he hasn't smiled very well, and it drops off his face.
Yeah.
And it's a really, it's silly when he does it, but immediately after, when his face drops, that's a really subtle, I thought, performance from Arnie, in that he looks a little bit wounded. He looks a little bit upset, maybe, because he just drops it immediately and he realizes he's not doing a good job. There's a couple of moments where he's being inefficient, and then he immediately looks dissatisfied. He's not quite doing a good enough job at being a human, and he can tell it, and then he drops it and he looks a bit annoyed.
And the fact you said inefficient, that fits with the machinery, because he is a machine, and machines don't sort of like do a bad job. They're just doing it inefficiently if they do anything wrong.
Exactly. So the T-1000 has some similar moments with that, though, doesn't he? He's got that more built-in humanity in his sneakiness, and that really kind of peaks towards the end, where you think Sarah's going to finish him off with the shotgun, but she runs out of shells. And he wags his finger at her. He's so cocky. Also, when he's fighting Arnie, and it looks like he's defeated him, he's really cruel and brutal. He's not like, so the Terminator in the first film is efficient, a ruthless killing machine that just kills people as quickly as possible. There's a sense with the T-1000 that it's more than just killing the T-800. He's annoyed with it. He's brutal with it. He smashes up his face. He could just, why doesn't he just turn his hand into a blade and cut his head off, or whatever?
Yeah.
He smashes him up. And then when he's all beaten up and he's on the floor, he's crawling along. He's just trying to get to the gun, and he's on his last legs. And the T-1000 just watches him and just lets him crawl along. And he could kill him at any moment, but he's letting him get as close as possible to that shotgun. He's trying to give the T-800 hope.
Yeah.
Before
so it seems more
takes it away. It's cruel. And it's the same thing when he's wagging his finger at Sarah. It is a bit of a humanizing moment, but it's a really horrible side of humanity. It's that cruelty.
It's because it's like he's been programmed to be this killing machine, but he's got more of the human traits that are associated with it.
He seems like he takes pleasure in it.
Yeah.
More than the T-800 ever has.
Yeah.
So we have that moment, and then it's immediately undercut when he wags his finger. That's when Arnie shows up again with a grenade launcher.
Yeah.
And that's where we see him turn into that John Carpenter warped, twisted.
Yeah. So is
metal
that the bit when
everywhere.
he goes up on this like cog or something like that?
He shows up on
Just
the cog with a
rolls
grenade
up.
launcher
Yeah.
and pops one in it. Is it a grenade launcher? I think it's a grenade.
Something like that, yeah.
Because it fully explodes the T-1000.
Yeah.
So he's just a mangled monster. So we've had that humanizing, and then it's immediately undercut. He's turned back into this screeching, awful, twisted thing. And he goes way beyond being a robot at that point. He is a horrible creature, and then he falls in the lava, and we see even more of that twisted, horrible war thing.
His face as well looks like it's in pain.
Yeah.
But then they're not supposed to feel pain. But you see it in
But
his...
he's definitely in pain when he's in that puddle of lava, which is then contrasted by Arnie goes in, and there's a bravery about it because he's sacrificing himself, and he goes in and he's stoic as he's lowered in. We've just seen the T-1000 turning into this screeching creature in pain, and Arnie just looks dead up, and obviously it's one of the best endings ever. He goes down, one arm up, and we just see the thumbs up, and that's
Which
the
is
last
brilliant.
thing we see.
It's so
It is
good.
brilliant.
Goodbye.
So these two films, the whole sort of like man versus machine aspect of these two films, they're both very different. So the first film is showing artificial intelligence as something that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's menacing. It's coming to get you. It's not far off. And then the second one says it's not far off, but you know what? Yeah, fate can be changed. Mm-hmm. We can use it to our advantage as well.
Yeah, it's working alongside the machines. But essentially the message is that we kind of need to stay in control of it, I think. So Skynet is always a threat, but the Terminator can be our buddy because it's kind of under our control. But that's an interesting message. I mean, when you do line it up against stuff like Blade Runner and HAL, and you think about those are pitched more in terms of evolution. So I think Roy Batty he's a villain, but there's a lot of sympathy for that character because he feels very human. He's developed emotions. Hal, I'm still not sure about Hal, how I feel about him, but I felt some sympathy towards him in that he seemed to be acting in self-defense. He was looking out for his own interests. He was trying to maybe save the others, but then wasn't able to, so he just protected himself. The Terminator in the second film, he's a bit of he's like a pet. Right? He doesn't quite get that same level of evolution, and evolution is still seen as the ultimate threat, which is Skynet. So I don't think that these films, I mean, the second one's a lot more hopeful, but I still don't think it's very sympathetic to AI. I think that we've seen other films that are much more have a lot more sympathy towards AI.
AI can lead to a dystopian future.
Yeah.
That's what seems to be happening in a lot of these films, like Metropolis. That sort of had elements of a dystopia, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
To it. And then this is doing a similar thing, sort of like years and years later. So you've still got that connection between the two. Like technology can be a bad thing.
We haven't quite, in all those years, we still haven't reconciled our fear of what the machines might do to us. So I think what we've learned today is there are a couple of absolutely great movies, and we can all agree James Cameron is the greatest filmmaker of all time.
Yeah, I think you may be a little bit biased with that, but yeah, he's definitely very good.
So what are we going to be talking about next, James?
So next week, we're going to go a bit more lighthearted. So we're going to be looking at War Games from 1983, and we're also going to have a look at Short Circuit from 1986.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about Short Circuit and War Games, we'll be discussing a little bit about how machines are being used for, how machines are often depicted as being used in war, and the impact that has on AI as an idea. So obviously, we talked about Skynet and Terminator and the menace of machine. So when we talk about Short Circuit in particular, I'm sure we'll be discussing a lot more about the sort of the lighter side of that.
Yeah, but with a serious undertone, I think.
Serious undertone, definitely. Excellent. Well, that's all we have time for today. Join us again next week when we chat about Short Circuit and War Games.